I recently found a video on YouTube that looked fairly simple. It was mechanical as far as I can tell, no subjectivity in the trade, and it promised a lot. Based on a single candle, always works, enormous profits. And as you can see here, it has had over 100,000 views. So I thought I just had to try this. I won't go over the full strategy here. I'll leave you to watch the original video to get that, and make sure that you get the original. That way I'm not giving you any wrong information. But my summary of the rules for this strategy: set a price range using a 5-minute candle at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Most brokers will align midnight market time to 5 p.m. New York. That would mean that 9:30 Eastern Standard Time is 16:30 market time. So I'm going to be running my strategy starting at 16:30 market time. And because I'm running inside an expert advisor, I don't need to use a 5-minute candle. I can equally look at the 1-minute candles that cover that same time range. So I'm going to be running this strategy on the 1-minute chart. Once that time range has expired and set the price range for that time, then wait for a fair value gap that closes outside that range to set the direction of trading. Then wait for the price to re-enter that fair value gap. So we're not trading immediately, we're waiting for a pullback, and then wait for an engulfing candle in the trade direction. So a pullback and then an engulfing candle in the direction of trading. Set the stop loss behind the engulfed candle. Take profit is 3-1, and then just repeat that every day. Typical approach for this might be to simply say each of these conditions has been met and set a flag for each one and then test all of those flags. I'm taking a slightly different approach because the channel is about coding, and I'm using a state and transition method. So I've identified 5 different states: start of day, in range, fair value gap, re-entry, and then done. Now from each of these states then an event happens. So start of day, the event that happens from that is that we cross the end time, and that moves to the in range state. Then we wait until there is a fair value gap, and then we go to the fair value gap found state, and so on. And so I'm going to be coding this in this event and state model. It's fairly simple for this example. Everything's in a straight line, but sometimes you get more complex conditions, and it could be that one of these states, the particular event, will loop backwards. A different event from the same state could loop backwards to a different point. You can even get branches in these. So what I'm showing you is a simple example, but it's meant to be an example of how you can code to deal with this kind of logic. Let's get straight into the code. And once I've written the code, then I can run tests and show how my results stack up. So now getting into the code for this particular strategy, I've got MetaTrader open here. I'm going to go to the IDE, and I've already created part of the code, the outline. So I've just got comments here. This is the link to the strategy on YouTube. I've just got my properties in there: on init, on dinit, on tick, OpenPosition. That's a function I'm going to write later. So I've added the function header already and just left this empty. And of course my isNewBar function, which I will need, and I refer to that so often. The first thing I'm going to need is a link to the trade class because I will be using that. And I'll need an object of type cTrade, which I'll just call trade and then cPositionInfo. And now to handle that state transition that I was talking about, I'm going to create an enum that holds all of those states. So these are my states: start of day, range found, fair value gap found, re-entry, and done after I make the trade. There's no state for engulfing candle found, because once an engulfing candle is found, then I immediately open the trade and that goes straight to the state done. So next I'll add some inputs. And this is the range time inputs. So the strategy said to trade at 9:30, or to start measuring the range at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. If your broker is like most brokers and they set midnight to 5 p.m. New York time, then 9:30 Eastern Standard will be 16:30 and 9:35 would be 16:35. I've set these as separate inputs for the hour and the minute because that at least lets you then run the optimizer if you want to, and you can set it to change the hour and the minute separately. If I set these as strings, then you couldn't run them through the optimizer. I'm allowing you to input the profit ratio. And then the usual inputs for a volume. And I'm just going to be trading the minimum volume here. So my actual results in terms of dollars profit or loss won't match the strategy, but you can at least see if you make a profit or loss and adjust this volume accordingly. And then a magic number and just a comment there. Now, by entering the start hour and minute and the end hour and minute, I actually want to change those to number of seconds into the day. So I want to change 1630 to number of seconds since midnight, and the same for the hour, because I'll be using that throughout the rest of the code to know if I've passed that end time. So because those values won't change through the running of the code, I'm just going to create two global variables, start seconds and end seconds, and they're like a constant because I won't be changing them, but I can't declare them with const here because I actually set them in the onInit function. Now in onInit, the usual trade set expert magic number so that all of the trades get that magic number. And then I'm setting the start seconds and end seconds to hours by 3600 plus minutes multiplied by 60. So now into onTick, and I'm setting up a state variable. I know the date time of today, which is the one that I'll use to detect if a new day has started, the start time and the end time for today, and also the high and low price for the range that have been found today. Now, I'm setting these up as local variables within the onTick function and declaring them as static because I don't want to create global variables for this. I like to keep the scope of variables as small as possible. And they're going to be static because obviously each time there is a new tick, we come back into this code and restart it. So I'm just declaring them all here as static, and that way they'll remember what I had last time I left this function. The first thing I do is check the is new bar because nothing happens if a bar hasn't just closed. So there's no point in coming through here at every tick. So if it's not a new bar, then I'll return, and that's my common is new bar function. I should also mention that I intend to have this running on a 1 minute chart. Although the strategy says that the first candle that you look for is a 5 minute candle and you get the high and low of that candle, I can do the same thing by looking at the 5 1 minute candles that make that up. So I'm going to run the entire strategy on the 1 minute chart. So now the very first state check that I do, as I said, every time we pass midnight, I simply start a new day. So I'm just getting the new day time, which is the period D1 time for the symbol. Comparing that with today, which I initialized here as 0 the first time we came through. After that, it's going to be whatever the current day is. And if there is a new day, then I set the state to the start of day state. I set today to the new day, and the time and end are just today plus the seconds for each of those. And now there is a state that I call done, which will mean that everything has already happened. And if the state is done, there's no point in going any further. I don't put the test for the done state at the beginning of the code because obviously if I did that, I'd never reach this new day and reset everything. But I can check it immediately after I've tested for a new day. And the next thing I need to test then is whether I have passed the end time for the range. Now, I'm not checking the start time at all in terms of the state condition. All I really need to know is that the time has gone past that end time. Now, I'm also writing all of this code inside the one onTick function. I would typically separate these sections out into separate functions because they're easier to manage, but I just think it'll be easier to follow if I write it all in line here. I'm first declaring a variable called now, that's just the current time. And here is where I'm using the states to test what I'm doing. I'm only executing this block of code if the current state is the start of day state. And then I'm adding a test, and now is greater than the end time. So if I'm in start of day and I've just passed the end time, then the first thing I do is say that the state is now state range found. That means this block of code won't happen again until we get a day reset. I get the end bar, which is just the iBar shift function, looking for the end time. And this false says that if there is no actual bar with that time, then it will find the nearest bar before that time. And I do the same for the start bar. Given that I'm using a 1 minute chart, it's possible, although unlikely, but it's possible that nothing happened in that 1 minute that is the end bar. So if I had set this to true, I would just get an error coming back if nothing is found there. By setting it to false, I'll get the end time, or I'll get the bar that is the nearest to that end time before the end time. And now I go into this code because I have used that false, and it's possible that the bar I found is not the actual end time bar. So I'm going to say if the time for that end bar is less than the end time, then I'm going to move the end bar minus minus. Now remember that bars are counted with 0 on the right, counting up. So I'm going to move the end bar one more bar to the right. And that is because I don't actually count the values in the end bar. I count everything before the end bar. So if you set the end time to 1635, I would count everything to the end of the 1634 candle, but nothing in the 1635 candle. And then I have a similar test here, but this time I'm checking the start bar. And if the time for that start bar is less than the start time. Now this is equally because it's possible that nothing happened during that 1 minute of 1630. And so I want to find the actual first bar. If nothing happened in that 1630, then the start bar that's found would be 1629 or 1628 or something before that. So while the time for that start bar is less than the actual start time that I'm looking for, I move the start bar forward, again with the minus minus. And then as a final check, in case something very strange has happened on that day, if the start bar is less than or equal to the end bar, then I simply set the state to done and return. So now that I've reached the state range found, I'm just going to save the high and low values. So the high price and the low price, I get those with the iHigh and the iLow function. And for the high, I'm looking for the iHighest bar, and low, obviously looking for the lowest bar. Looking at the 1 minute period, mode high, mode low. And the range I'm looking at is start bar minus end bar. So remember, we're counting the bars from the right to the left. So the start bar is a higher number than the end bar. So this gives me the number of bars to look at, beginning at end bar plus 1. So assuming everything has gone to plan, I have bars at 1630, 31, 32, 33, 34, and I've just opened the bar at 1635. So end bar would be 0, and start bar would be 5. So I want 5 bars, 5 minus 0, beginning with bar number 1, and that will give me the bars 1634, 33, 32, 31, and 1630. So now continuing all of the code in line, I've also taken the approach in this code of declaring variables just before I need them, even though they're static and they'll be remembered throughout the lifetime of the code. Typically, I would declare all of these at the beginning of the code, but for this example, I'm declaring them as they come up. So I am going to need rates. I'm declaring an array of rates of type MQL rates. I want those rates to be such that rates 0 matches candle or bar number 0. And so I have to use array setter series rates true. If I didn't do that, then rates 0 would be to the left. And then I use copy rates to populate that. I'm populating beginning with candle number 0 for 4 candles and putting that value into rates. I don't actually need the value in candle number 0, but I just found it easier to have rates such that the index of rates matched the candle numbers. So this will give me the rates values for candles 0, 1, 2, and 3. Then an order type, which is the direction that the breakout has happened, and I'm setting a high or saving the high and low values of the fair value gap when it's found. So now the code to search for that fair value gap. Now, a fair value gap happens in a 3-bar pattern where the high of the first bar is lower than the low of the third bar, or for a pattern going downwards, then the low of the first bar is higher than the high of the third bar. So there's a gap between those two candles. So I'm saying if the state is range has been found, and now I have some conditions, and you'll see here I've got a commented out line. This will be in the code for you to check, but it's because the handling of the fair value gap is a little bit unclear in the video. I've gone with this particular handling. If the low for rates 1 is greater than the high for rates 3, then a gap has formed. But I also want that candle to break out of the range. And that simply means that rates 1 closed above the high price. I've done the same for the short side. If the high for rates 1 is less than the low for rates 3, and rates 1 has closed below the low price, then I've got a fair value gap in a 3-candle pattern that has broken out of the range. These conditions that I have simply say that I've closed above the high price or closed below the low price. Nothing in that says that the 3-candle pattern originated inside the range. And that's the bit that's a little unclear in the description of the strategy. This alternate line of code has the same thing for detecting the fair value gap, and that the price has closed above the range in this case. But it also adds then this condition which says that the 3-candle pattern must begin inside the range. If this is true, then I've had a breakout to the high side with a fair value gap. So I simply set order type is buy. I'm buying. I set the fair value gap high is the low of rates number 1. So this is actually measuring the gap between bars 1 and 3. And of course, the fair value gap low is rates 3 high. And then I set the state to fair value gap found. The same on the short side, but the order type is sell. The high is the low for rates 3, and the low is the high for rates 1. The next thing to do is to wait for re-entry. Again, using this state model, I'm simply saying if the state is gap found, then if the breakout direction is a buy and the low price is less than the gap high. So I don't care if I'm closing inside the fair value gap. I don't care if the low is below it or inside the gap. As long as it is less than the high, then the price has gone back inside that fair value gap. And all I'm doing is setting the state to re-entry. I've got a separate condition here if the type is sell and the high is greater than the low for the gap. And after all of that, the last thing to check for is an engulfing candle. So first test here, obviously I'm checking that the current state is the re-entry state. And so now I'm looking for an engulfing candle. When I watched the strategy video, the interpretation of engulfing candle wasn't what I was expecting. An engulfing candle should be where the open and close fully engulfs the open and close of the candle before. But there seemed to be a small gap. And I guess that's just an allowance that the opening price of one candle might be slightly different to the close price of the candle before. And so to allow for that, and to get my results a little bit closer to the results from the strategy, I've taken a slightly modified approach to an engulfing candle. I've got these two range values, which are simply the size of the movement from close to open for candle 2 and candle 1. The range for candle 1 must be greater. If it's going to be engulfing, it must be a bigger body. So if the range is greater, then if my breakout direction is a buy, then I'm saying the close for candle 1 must be higher than the open for candle 1, so it must be moving in the direction of the break, and the open for candle 1 must be less than or equal to the open of candle 2. So that avoids situations where there might be a large gap in trading and the body of candle 1 is completely outside the range of the body of candle 2. I've got the same condition for the short side, but here close must be less than open, so I'm looking for a down candle, and the open for rates 1 must be greater than or equal to the open for rates 2. And this condition also makes sure that the candle number 2 was moving in the opposite direction, so the engulfing candle is a reversal candle. If those are true, then I just call open position with the direction, and the stop loss for a long trade is the low of candle number 2, the one that's been engulfed. The stop loss for a short trade is the high of the candle that's been engulfed. And then I just set the state to done. So we're almost there. I just haven't written the code yet for this open position, and it's relatively simple. So I'm using this MQL tick variable to get the current bid and ask price with the symbol info tick, because the open price, depending if it's a type buy, will be the ask price or the bid price. The stop loss has been passed into the function. The take profit is the open plus the difference between open and stop loss multiplied by that profit ratio, which by default is 3. I just normalize double for each of the open, stop loss, and take profit, and then simply call position open using this trade object for the symbol, the type, the order type here, the input volume, the open price, stop loss price, take profit price, and the comment. And that takes care of everything. Just make sure that compiles. It does without error. Now I'm not going to take you through watching me run all of the tests on this. I'm going to run them and then just show some slides with the results, because you've got all of the code here. If you think I may have misinterpreted some of the comments from the strategy video, then you can modify this code to suit. I'm just going to run the tests and then I'll show you my comparisons. In the video, there were 2 examples given of real-world pricing. And he said that the first example was from the 29th of August 2025, but didn't actually say when the second example happened. But if I watch the video, there's a brief section where I can actually see a date in the bottom of the screen, and that seemed to be the 22nd of August 2025. Now, I loaded both of these dates into my MetaTrader terminal, and the price patterns there did match what he was showing on screen. So I'm confident that the prices that I have, while they might be slightly different because of different broker pricing, I'm confident that I've got the right time frames and the price was doing the same things. My results on a test just of the 29th, so I set my start date to the 29th and my end date to the 30th, and I can see I made a profit on that day. The profit that I made is far less than his quoted profit. Now remember, I am setting this to the minimum volume of 0.1, but at least I do have that profit. When I traded on the 22nd, so I set my start date to the 22nd and end date to the 23rd, I got the one trade and a profit again. So this matches what he was showing in his video in terms of results. Then I ran for a complete month, all of August 2025. And you can see I had some winning trade at the beginning, and then some more winning trades here, some long periods of gradual losses, and then some good results to the end of the month. So altogether, August was a profitable month. Then I ran for the entire year. And those periods of gradual loss do accumulate. And I can see that although August was a good month, overall for the year 2025, or January to August 2025, this was a losing strategy. Now, I'm not saying that it would be a losing strategy in all cases. Maybe I've misinterpreted some of the trading rules. Maybe the pricing that he has from his broker is different to the pricing I'm getting from this broker. A lot of things could be happening, but it doesn't appear to be a startlingly good trading strategy. I'm not seeing enormous returns here. So those are my results. If you want to download the code, then please do so. The link will be there for you. And you can modify this code then to make any adjustments you see fit, or if you think that I have the strategy wrong, you can change to suit. But this was my test. I hope this has been useful to you, and I hope you've learned something useful in the coding technique. If you want to see more of those videos, click the like button because it helps me to make more videos, and click subscribe, and then click the bell icon to be notified when I release new videos. Thank you for watching.